Hello there. Welcome to this session on incentivizing alignment, forging a united leadership team. My name is Matt Ross. I'm a consulting editor with Global Government Forum who run this event and have been a journalist sort of focusing on how government operates the last 20 odd years. I'm a Brit and my French is terrible, but I bet the panel's French is far better. If you wish to put questions to the panel in French, you're very welcome to. We'll do our best to deal with them. And forgive my jargon. The session title is I like the way the words sit together. But what I'm trying to get at is what it really means. How do we get leaders and managers across government to work together in the pursuit of shared cross-government goals, even when actually that requires inevitably some compromise or some cost or some inconvenience, perhaps in their own goals as a leader or for their own organisation. There's always that tension we see around the world. We'll save as much time as possible for questions and interactions with the audience or points from you guys. But first, let's hear from our panel. To my immediate left here is Hani Dakanai, Director General for Digital Policy at the Treasury Board. Next, Liz McEwen, Executive Director, Digital Talent and Leadership Sector, also at Treasury Board. And then Chris Thorne, Chief Digital Officer, Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, also from the UK. Yes, also our French will be similar.
Whose French is bad.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here. I love and hate this topic. I think it's a Canadian thing. We avoid conflict sometimes, and sometimes to our detriment. But we also, I don't think, are wired to be collaborative in government because of structural incentives that sort of set us up this way. I think it goes further back. Just as a quick test of this assumption that I've just made, could you please raise your hand just across the room if you were all good students in school? Okay.
Really.
Can you keep your hands raised if you absolutely love group projects? Okay. Marked difference. I think we were all conditioned and raised in a diet of gold stars in the first place. And by the time we got to the public service, we have performance plans that, again, have us competing with each other for that gold star. Again, and the gold stars are finite. And sometimes we forget that there are larger outcomes than individual gold stars. But at the end of the year, our individual PDA sort of incent us to just look very narrowly at our own deliverables, our own measures. When we apply for job interviews, every type of the programming is also, I did this, I made this happen, rather than we. And so a lot of the conversations have to do with revisiting, like, even how we encode that in our HR processes and policies, our own behaviors and what gets rewarded internally. Our governance tables, where sometimes it feels like we shy away and end up just rubber stamping each other's submissions rather than actually being offering actual positive challenge for a greater outcome. And also looking very critically from the outside in and remembering what we're doing this work for rather than just in the context of our position in government.
Thank you.
Okay, so Hani and I did not plan this ahead of time, but I also have a hands up exercise. Because I want to talk a little bit about pain, and I want to understand who can feel this pain that I'm going to talk about. So put your hand up if you're a public servant, any government, public servant. Mm-hmm. Keep your hand up if you've ever been involved either in applying for a recruitment staffing process or tried to hire someone from a recruitment staffing process. Great. Now keep your hand up if that was a pleasurable experience. That's the pain. That's the pain we can all relate to, right? We know what government recruitment and hiring is all about. It's, you apply your candidature through different platforms. You watch for every different government department that might be hiring. You revisit your skills a little bit differently every time, and then you wait, and you wait, and you wait. Same type of a process for a hiring manager, and you wait, and at the end of the day, the candidates that you want have probably already moved on or just left government entirely because the process is so poor. There's a huge cost to that, right? There's a huge cost from a productivity perspective, how much time we spend as employees and managers going through those extremely painful processes, but a cost to how we feel about government, a cost to how we feel about the ways that we work and our value as public servants in delivering services. And a cost on the actual work that we're meant to be doing, because not many of us were actually hired to hire people or hired to try to apply for processes. So that's the chaos. That's the chaos we have in not just the digital community, although that's what I want to speak more about is our digital community, but that's the chaos what we have when it comes to recruitment and staffing in Government of Canada. And I would suspect in all other government jurisdictions as well. Huge amount of chaos, we don't need it. So now let's imagine what it could look like. So this is the part where you're supposed to start to feel good about the story, because I just made you feel about all those horrible feelings you've been through in those painful processes. So now imagine where you had a process where you go one singular place, identify all your skills, update your skills as they get updated. Those skills are credentialized once, never again. All those government jobs that you want to apply for in the digital space are there, and you're told automatically if you're interested in one, whether your skills match or not. And as a hiring manager, you can easily match the skills that you need with the skills of the candidates on the platform. And even better, as a hiring manager, you can quickly, when you find that right candidate, capture that full package for your HR professionals, ship it off to them, letter of offers come in. Wouldn't that be amazing? Okay, hands up if that's something that you think you could live with. Yeah. Okay, good. So this is an easy story so far, right? So now I want to tell you a little bit about what I do at Treasury Board. Treasury Board, we've had a lot of folks here today. I'm in Treasury Board in the office of the CIO, and our focus is on digital talent and leadership. Our focus is on figuring out what we do with our 30,000 plus employees in the Government of Canada in the digital space, where we have a significant gap. We have a significant gap in skills, significant gap in number of employees, and we really struggle with bringing in external talent to help fill those gaps. And one of the things that my talented team has done is they have launched this amazing platform. This is a platform that's live today, and I'm going to sell this platform because this is very linked to the topic around incentivization. This platform is live today. All of your employees can build profiles on it. We've had over 6,000 profiles built since it was officially launched just a few months ago. All of their skills have been launched, and we're now pulling talent from that. Departments that have brought managers to the table who would like to give a little bit of effort in helping to design posters are able to quickly and seamlessly find talent without launching their own processes. The modules that are coming in the future are those HR packages that I talked about. We're expanding from outside of the IT space to the rest of the classifications in the digital community, such as information management, data, cloud practitioners, cyber. We know what the scope is, and all of those are in near future, not 5-10-year future, 18, 24-month futures. So I just want to give you a taste of what we're doing today. And that's only the beginning of the services that we do within our team. We also do a lot of talent management and learning and career paths as well. But the reason why I bring this to the table is because we talk about incentivizing, right? So we have this platform. It's there for you to leverage. What kind of incentivization is required for managers and public servants to stop working in silos, to stop launching their own processes, to stop applying to their departmental processes, and to start leveraging a GC-wide platform in order to enable the best prioritization of talent across the GC? What are the incentivization that we need in order to do that? It's faster. It's easier. It works across all of government. It works in all of your departments. I don't have the answer to that question other than perhaps marketing like I'm trying to do, I'm shamelessly promoting today. But I want to just also mention that we know that there's a reason why we need to do this. The stakes of not following this path, of following a singular platform where we can leverage and hire talent at a much faster pace are absolutely critical. And some of our last panel members, a colleague from Treasury Board spoke about this. She talked about the fact that our government services are lagging. That's an understatement, right? We know that government services are really lagging. They don't meet the needs of Canadians for the most part. And one of the reasons for that is our lack of talent. We need more people with more skills, with different skills in order to build and evolve our services. And crappy services at the end of the day erode trust in government. This is really, really big. So it's not just about incentivizing you to leverage a centralized recruitment platform because it's the right thing to do, because it's the only way we're going to be able to deal with our talent gaps and be able to make sure that we start designing and delivering those services that meet the needs of citizens and reduce that gap in trust.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I kind of, I think it was said at the beginning, the title of this session is quite long, so I kind of paraphrased it in my head as, how do we herd cats? And I guess I've spent most of my career trying to do that, either in, before digital was a thing, started in traditional technology, and I've always worked in this kind of triangle between customer, business and the organization, and technology. And for me, it always goes in that order. Customer first, it's now citizens, now I work in the public sector. Then what is the organization trying to achieve? What's the interaction between those two? And then, okay, what technology can help to get us there? And I was thinking, okay, so I've been doing this for a couple of decades now. What are the kind of things that have helped me to, bring people in the same direction? At the moment, I'm trying to land a big digital transformation in my current UK government Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. And there we have 32 different arm's length bodies that are all delivering services in separate but overlapping areas. And they've all got their own management boards, CEOs, et cetera. And then we have policy people in our core part of our department. So it's probably all the things that I've come across before, but multiplied by a factor of 2. And before I came to DEFRA, I was at the Department of Work and Pensions. And I came from the third sector, a charity, really large UK charity where I'd been doing transformation. And when I asked my new boss at DWP before I joined, what do I need to do in my first 3 months? What's it going to look like? And used to working in the private sector and in the third sector, I was thinking there was going to be this really long list of all the things that I had to achieve in those first 3 months. And he said, just go around and talk to people and listen and, see what's going on. He says, we've got something good going on here. This is a Universal Credit Programme, which is a really big UK digital service backbone of the UK welfare state. He said, I don't want you to mess it up. So just see what's working before you decide what might need changing. And I turned to my wife afterwards. I said, just had a call with my new boss. That sounds really easy. All I have to do is, first 3 months, just go and talk to people. And it was probably some of the best career advice that I've ever had. And although I like people and I listen to people all the time, it's now kind of like a mantra. And I don't know about you, if you've been in a department where some new person comes in from somewhere else and they've got all these bright new ideas of how to do things differently. Has it ever really, really annoyed you when they try and land exactly the same thing that they've done in every single organization they've ever worked in before, without seeing what the problems are that you're trying to solve, what the people you've got, where you're at, anything that gives you context of what the right solutions are for where you're at. And so I think, number one, for me, listen to people. If you start to understand where they're at and what their problems are, you can then start to build trust, you can build relationships. Things only get done through people. So I think, those are the 2 things that I would say about alignment. I thought of another 6 this morning, but maybe, as questions come up, we'll see, they might come out as well.
Speed them all in, yes. Yeah, we do want to keep it as interactive as possible. Curious to hear your views as well as your questions to the panel. I think we have a roving mic at the back, so anyone want to stick their hand up and kick things off? No, well, all right. Well, you have a think, because I've always got questions. Actually, just what occurs to me, actually, having worked quite a bit with the Canadian government around the Public Service Data Challenge, which we run with government, and around these events too. And, obviously I know the UK civil service quite well. And in terms of kind of collaboration, I think I observe that Canadian public servants are more kind of collegiate than collaborative, if that makes sense. You seek consensus, actually. You want to make sure that everybody's in agreement. It's quite hierarchical as well. There's a seeking of permission. And there's quite a great loyalty to individual departments, which sometimes comes at the cost of, sense of belonging of the wider public service. And that's just my observations, but all those factors kind of mitigate against government operating as a single identity, even though I really like them individually as characteristics amongst Canadian public servants. But data requires that unified way of working, and digital requires it, and ultimately public citizens require government to work together around their needs. So there's a huge spirit of public service and huge commitment to serving the public. There's just that some of those ways of working probably. Well, any thoughts on does that ring true at all? Go on, honey.
Absolutely. I guess there are. Okay, so let me put it this way: we tend to be collegial, and honestly, in our heart of hearts, I think there is a desire to be collaborative, and then the urgency of delivery kind of steps in, and the urgency of actually, I just want to be transactional. And that sort of breaks down very quickly. And I think that's something that we probably need to, again, as a behavior, need to check, because everybody has an urgent deliverable, and everybody needs to have that grown-up conversation and not be afraid to actually say, okay, I know that you have these priorities as well. How do we work this out? Or let's talk through that tension together. And I don't know if that is a default yet in, I guess, in boardrooms or in meetings. I think it's easier to get at one-on-one conversations rather than in large settings. And so you could end up in maybe, I don't know, alignment meetings at about 50 plus people in attendance and feel like you're talking at rather than listening to each other and just waiting for the other person to finish, and then you kind of spout off the exact opposite. But I guess notionally everybody's agreeing at the end, but nobody knows what happened, which is not constructive either. And so I think that is a default that we need to confront and address and likely worry about as well, like at all levels, because again, that would also, we would perpetuate the cycle if we don't.
Thank you. There's any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept there, because I'm thinking about practical examples in the workplace, and I do think that, we talk a lot about collaboration, and consensus sometimes gets in the way of collaboration, and certainly consensus can get in the way, I think, of working at the speed that we need to work at. And determining what is that balance depending on what is the situation and what is the outcome you need and when do you have to get there is something that I think as managers in government we struggle with, understanding what is the level of consensus versus collaboration, and when is consensus off the table. It's more about just being part of that process and recognizing that not everybody gets everything they want, because the greater good is the incentivization. The greater good is that ability to be able to work across government and to be able to take as much as can be done from all different organizations or collaborators and land on something that is enough.
Thank you. And Chris, I'd vary the point to you as a UK official, because since 2010 in the UK, there's been a whole set of changes which are around essentially strengthening the role of the Cabinet Office, strengthening the role of the professions across government, which is about ensuring that alignment. So, I mean, the question for Canadians probably, in your experience, what of those which of those agendas really worked and got the best results, and are there any which actually were counterproductive, or any lessons from the UK experience that Canadians could learn from?
Yeah, I'm actually really, really positive about the UK model, actually. For those of you not aware that, so within the Cabinet Office, there was a department called GDS, Government Digital Services, and it kind of had two roles. One was about actually delivering services itself, so that would go across all government departments, but also to bring up the kind of and set the standards for digital services across government. Some years back, that split into two parts. GDS, which delivers those cross-government services, and I don't know, I know some colleagues from CDDO, which is the other half, were supposed to be here today. I think they got delayed on the flight, but that's Central Digital and Data Office. And again, I think that has been incredibly useful. It's got a very energetic CEO who has the support at the highest levels to go and talk to all our permanent secretaries around government, knock on their door, ask them what they're doing about digital transformation. And they set a roadmap. So they put on their 6 areas where across government we could do better, basically. And what I've done at DEFRA is I've actually based our digital transformation on that roadmap. And why that's quite good is that it's not just, oh, that's Chris saying that. He would say that because he's the CDO and he loves digital and blah, 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 something digital, blah, blah, blah. You go, well, actually, this is not just my thing. This is a cross-government thing. This has got support from the highest levels of government to say, these are the things where we need to improve. All I've done is taken those and said, okay, what does that mean to us within this department? What are specific services? What are another one of the missions is about data. What do we need to do to improve our data? Another one's about service levels. What are our current service levels, and put it within a DEFRA context. And so I found that incredibly helpful because it takes away some of that tension that you even get within departments. And they're also trying to do cross-government skills initiatives. Actually, it's the reason I ended up at DEFRA, because there's they do a talent pipeline. And so I came from DWP via a kind of a CDDO process to DEFRA. So I've only seen it work really, really well. I think the kind of things that don't work well are when things are too prescriptive. And this is not a criticism of CDDO, but there's one area where you go, they've done it right because it's the only option they had, is one of the things they've got this top 75 list of government services in the UK. And they had to find a way to go, well, what are those top services? And so they've taken a number of users, amount of money paid through the service, et cetera, to identify them. So there's a few DEFRA services on there, and I think that's good. It's now on it's on a hall of shame kind of thing. You've got to get these to a certain standard, and that's useful. But actually within DEFRA, so we're going to get those to a great standard, and half of them are nearly there. But the services used within DEFRA that actually, I don't know, avian flu service, it's like not really used by the general public if there isn't, a crisis. Same with, flood alerts and other things that you wouldn't say is a top service on a day-to-day basis. But when there's a crisis, oh my goodness, that is really, really important. So again, taking the general idea of understanding what the priority services are and making them so great. Totally agree with that, that kind of principle, and that's what we're trying to do. And actually, we're kind of building on CDDO and taking it a step further and going, well, okay, we'll get those to great because the public see them all the time. But what about these other things that are really important to us and will be really important to businesses and the public when there's a crisis? And let's get those to great as well. So it's kind of building on what's there that's a kind of a generic kind of level, and then building on it for our particular context. And if you try and just say, you will do this thing on this way, that won't work. But we don't really have that. It's really good. It's just a really good foundation and starting point.
I mean, government digital service started out very, very mandatory, spending controls and everything. But actually, after a few years, it got things moving now. And it was far better to do things with people. There's a lady here. The microphone not working.
I'll probably come
I can shout. Oh, it's on? Okay. We lead a digital transformation office, and I think we look at it from a different perspective of forging a united leadership team is getting our leadership team to build that consensus. So it's, I take a little bit away with what you said with herding cats. That's what we feel like. And, it's everybody wants to have their take on it at our leadership team, and everybody's priorities first. And so we go to these meetings and we go round and round, and then we leave and we're like, guys, what was the priority there? So any advice on how to overcome those challenges of, whether it's cross-departmental, everybody's priority is the highest priority, and they all talk about it and they're nice about it, but there's no ever a decision made. And so we kind of go away and do what we think, but I feel like we're on the hamster wheel.
Just briefly, in terms of the roadmap that Chris talked about, that replaced a previous digital strategy, which Migu, who runs CDDO, openly acknowledges didn't bite. It didn't work because it was essentially just coming from the centre and it was running only through the digital leaders. And so her roadmap, they've made a huge effort to actually get the permanent secretaries, your deputy ministers, on board, and they've signed their names up to that, and each of them have taken direct responsibility themselves for making the thing happen, because ultimately, the digital people are not in charge of the business systems. The public services has to come from the very top guys to really get the traction. That's just my observation. But, sorry, what's her name? And which organisation are you from?
Ontario Clean Water Agency.
From Ontario, thank you. Very good response.
For sure. Okay, so I guess this is my first opportunity to talk about where I work. And I'm with the Office of the CIO. I work with Liz, and I'm currently with the team that's responsible for the policy on service and digital, Canada's digital standards, as well as the management accountability framework for service and digital. Don't throw things at me if you're in the government in Canada. Now, to build alignment within our team, because we have a large change mission, one of the things that we have tried to do, essentially, is to make sure that we learn how to fight together to a degree. But we also have a shared performance plan in that not only, yes, people have individual responsibilities, but people understand how their role in terms of supporting another person actually enhances their specific work. And so we need to actually expose the interdependence between the various files, not just sort of have a rolling inventory of activities that you're going to do throughout the year. I think that in terms of planning that out and also revisiting it at various points in the year, because just because you plan it at one point in time doesn't mean that reality doesn't shift. That's also another way to visit it. Like, it's an active way of looking at our work, how we're working together, and relationships are like, and so alignment never happens just once as well. You're always arguing it out, sometimes day to day, sometimes several times a day, and it's worth it because it's better to be working towards the same outcome. Sometimes you're tackling it from a different angle. It doesn't mean that your work is less advanced. Yes, there are some days where everybody has to drop everything in service of one document sometimes because of an urgent demand, but that is not usually the norm. But I think that it is also incumbent on the leadership team to actually set that relationship like you have a duty of care to your team, and then also to your colleagues as well, that you're standing together in that way. And then united front, again, with everybody else. And you use that as well and set that as a way of setting expectations with how you work with other people.
Thank you.
I'd like to add a
Yes,
little
sure.
bit, just two thoughts. Know your organization's governance. And I think depending on the size of the initiative or the size of the engagement or the product that you're, sometimes we forget that there is governance in place for a specific reason. And even if it's not good governance, it's still governance that we need to be aware of. And by being aware of it, we can make sure that we can be a part of that governance and influence the change of it. So make sure that there is that visibility in your organization. And that's easier in some organizations than others. And sometimes that's dependent on, obviously, the size of the work that you're doing. But to me, the biggest thing is make sure that you're able to really clearly articulate the value of what you're doing. And then to be able to talk about that. And if you can't sell those around you on why what you're doing is so extremely important, why it should be a top priority, then that's a reflection point to determine maybe the now isn't. Maybe it isn't one of those top priorities right now. And if you struggle with that articulation, then there has to be work on that articulation, or maybe a reflection that it shouldn't be happening. That's a hard thing to do though, right? It's almost as hard as identifying what the problems are that we're trying to solve, articulating the value behind solving those problems. It's not an easy thing to do or to talk about it.
Chris, any thoughts on
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't plant the question, but it's a perfect question for me. So I'll be really quick, but it does give me a chance to talk about those other things I jotted down this morning. So after listen, seek areas of common need, interest. So again, if you can find those things between those people that you're trying to get together and find that way forward. If there's one thing that they all share, that they've got a problem that you can help with, maybe start there. There is going to have to be adaptation and a compromise, but maybe that comes later. You know, I had another one had start somewhere, anywhere was one of my, and that's the point there. If you get one thing, then you can maybe start to build trust and relationships, because that's the next way. Really, still things only get done by people, and until they like each other, and kind of it's only then that they'll start to maybe compromise and adapt. And I think Liz said this as well, that once you've got something, even if it's just one thing that you're going to agree on, write it down and make it clear afterwards. Yeah, kind of the boring stuff with meeting notes, agreements from that meeting, what that one thing is, but then try and build on it, and then try and kind of make, talking about marketing earlier, kind of build the story of, look, we've done this one thing and it's achieved these things for these three parts of the government or departments or whatever, and then just kind of do all those things on a rolling basis. And it can turn, if you're lucky with enough willpower and perseverance, it can turn from a bit of a kind of, you feel you're on a hamster wheel, to actually it's a virtuous circle where people are willing to put more into it because they know they'll get something out of it. They're willing to do a bit more compromise. They're willing to, do these other things. But you can't start out thinking it's all going to be sweetness and light and everyone's going to love everyone and they're going to do it just out the goodness of their heart. It doesn't happen like that. So you have to work hard and be prepared for those hard miles and uncomfortable conversations until you start to build it. So yeah, I guess my biggest advice is don't give up, keep going, and with perseverance, I'm sure you'll make it.
Nice. Thank you, Chris. There's a hand over here.
I think I was next, yes?
Okay, go ahead.
Well, this might be short, so. I was just thinking in terms of incentivizing alignment. I work in Government Canada at an organization called Policy Horizons, and we work across government. And one of the things that we try to do is try to help across government highlight the sort of big changes that are happening that can impact, many areas of policy, program, and services. And that's where I feel like that's a place where we could incentivize alignment, is where we kind of come together and talk about the disruptions and the changes that are happening that impact many program areas and many areas where government operates, and being able to kind of look together at what assumptions we're making about the future, so that we use an understanding of our assumptions and have common assumptions that we're using to base our policy and program decisions, some of the priorities that we're setting. Because I think what happens is that we don't all agree on the things that are happening around us. We have different visions of what's happening, and those different visions can drive priorities, and then those priorities are misaligned. It's almost coming before the priority setting stage, where we kind of understand how Canadian lives are changing, how our society is changing, how technology is, the disruptions that are happening. Do we all kind of look at those together at the leadership level and all through, and bring that down into the organization? Does that feel like a place that for you where alignment can start taking real shape?
There's one thing that some countries are doing is much strengthening the professions, the functions. So across finance or project management or policy making, all these fields, you create some very senior leader who's responsible for those staff across governments, and obviously the departments are the employers. But there's still a huge amount that people can do around kind of training and career pathways, common policy making, which that's one of these sort of lenses through which this stuff can be refracted across government. What thoughts do you have?
I'm going to come at this from, I think there is value in situational awareness of what is happening and trends on the horizon, and also understanding what various trade-offs where everybody is faced with, because there are some things that all departments would have in common. I think that central agencies probably could do more. One of the common things I say a lot in terms of how central agencies show up with departments is that they're supposed to have the gift of being able to have that data at their fingertips, or even just the access to that bigger picture, but we're barely able to reflect that back to give a sense of these are the trade-offs that decision makers are faced with, and these are the hard choices that are right in front of us. And I think that there is value in terms of incentivizing alignment around how do we prioritize when these are the hard realities, or also maybe these are the possibilities that we haven't contemplated. I think that Treasury Board, that is definitely one of the levers that we could probably bring to bear, again, when we are planning out for the next 3 years, or looking at, or even just in our interactions with departments. So thank you for that reminder.
Yes, I agree with everything you said. However, I think that it's much more than a top down, a leadership down. I think that it's on everyone. It's on everyone in this room, everyone in government, to be aware of and to know how to be aware. And I think so. The leadership is responsible for making sure their employees have easy access to be aware and have the right instruments and the right mechanisms to know how to prioritize and how to know how to look at those full environmental scans and what's changing in their environments to influence their own prioritization and their own program of evolution. But a certain amount comes from us as employees as well, that desire to do better, that desire to not replicate what you're doing at that table and at that table and at that table, and that desire to understand who are my communities and to find out what they're doing and how to leverage what they're doing. So I think it's all levels.
Yeah, so I mean, it makes a lot of sense how much government departments and how much even commercial organizations do on scenario planning. I'm not really sure. I think that, urgency drives a lot of activity, both in the public and the private sector. And things like the pandemic, I think, showed what is possible in a really short amount of time. If you think of even kind of basic stuff like we're saying for years, digital teams will have to be co-located in the same room. There's no interactivity or creativity unless you're all sitting around a table. Now, don't get me wrong. I think all being in a room together, it's great to be together like we are for this conference. But look, I worked during the pandemic at DWP, where we had to keep the UK welfare system going in a time of immediate crisis, where from one day to the next, we were all working together in one office in Whitehall till we were scattered all over the country. The number of applications for that benefit increased 10 times overnight. And the number of benefit claimants also doubled within 6 weeks. Now, it's difficult if we're in the same office dealing with that. We were all remote and somehow we dealt with it. But wouldn't it have been even better if there'd been scenario planning and going, what would happen if a pandemic hit? How would we work remotely? The first day we were all working from home. Nobody could get onto the VPN because the capacity wasn't there to automatically allow us to do that. We had to, collaboration tools, all things. We worked through very quickly, but actually all that stuff could have been thought about of how we would work in that kind of scenario. And if you dig down, probably it was on governments around the world, riskless. And I'm sure they'd had meetings and I'm sure there'd been mitigations and blah, blah, blah. I would question how much that mitigation was really practical rather than lots of people having meetings about things. And I'm not criticizing the UK government here. I'm just saying that as human beings, we're not very good at dealing with things that seem further away and seem improbable until the financial crisis happens and suddenly it's reality, or Russia invades Ukraine, or a global pandemic hits. And we've all coped and we've all changed. But it would probably have been better if a bit more time and effort, in all sorts of areas of life are, kind of thinking about, well, what's the context of where we are in the world? What could it look like? How can we prepare a bit better for tomorrow rather than everything being a crisis?
Organisations, governments do try to work on this stuff, of course, and the UK government gave itself many pats on the back about its pandemic preparedness strategy before the pandemic arrived. But there were two things went wrong, really. One was that it foresaw flu as the main problem rather than the particular nature of COVID. And secondly, then Brexit happened and everybody was very prioritised, and they literally deprioritised planning for the pandemic to focus on this immediate threat. And there's obviously a lesson there that actually, no matter the immediate pressures, governments need to carve out that space to keep on thinking about the future challenges. New Zealand's done something interesting. They've given all of their departmental heads a statutory responsibility to spend a certain amount of their time thinking about and planning for long-term policy challenges and threats, which gives them the space to be able to say to ministers who want them to focus on this latest thing, I'm sorry, it's out of my hands, I have to do this as part of my job. And that's, I think, that's quite an interesting approach. What other thoughts do we have or comments? We've got about time for at least one. This gentleman here. Mike will be over in just a second, sir.
Thank you. You had us very interested with that, describing the future of sort of the common HR system or talent acquisition system that already exists. Could you mention what it's called and how do we access it if it's already available?
Talent.canada.ca.
That's simple enough.
That's it. Thank you for asking. It was in my notes.
Yes, do look it up. And the other, there's another point here about it's not just about getting the existing staff to work in a different way. It's actually about what we're looking for when we select leaders, when we recruit people and develop them. What gets you promoted and what gets you hired? And I mean, Chris, you said you came in from the voluntary sector, and then you were carried through part of your career development by this CDDO run. Program, which is about building those cross-departmental behaviours, and it leads to yourself being in this role. What lessons do you take from that experience?
Well, one, actually, that the process works, which I think when you sometimes do these kind of performance management exercises, you kind of think, am I just filling in all these forms for the sake of filling in all these forms? And I think, it's made me think about the career progression of the people that work for me. Maybe, kind of make sure that because it's easy just to talk about the day-to-day stuff with your staff. And often they're also focused on what am I doing this week? What's the big problems? What do I need to talk to Chris about? Blah, blah, blah. Actually take some time and go, okay, yeah, we can deal with all that stuff. But, what do you want to be doing in the next 6 months, year, 2 years? What motivates you? How can I help you get to that place? And even as a leader, sometimes it's easy to forget that kind of stuff when you're under so much pressure. So somehow, at the very least, give your people time and space to have those conversations. Don't press them on them, but say, give them the frameworks, give them the time and permission to talk about it. I think actually, and that's been really good. And certainly, although I had lots of career progression in the private sector, I think that the structured approach in the UK civil service is pretty good. I think as long as we remember that some people are happy in the role that they're already doing, and we don't almost feel that if they're doing their job that they're at really well, somehow it's a failure. It's not a failure. It might suit their personal circumstances, what they want to do perfectly well. And I feel that we should reward those people just as highly as people who, have an ambition to go up the ladder, because, I think we just have to, treat everybody where they're at and what they want to do, and as an individual rather than a G6. We say, and I don't know what the other levels are in Canada, but all these. I joined the civil service, and they were talking about G6s and G7s. What is this? And it's the levels, but really it's just about people.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm just about out of time, but I just put one last question very briefly to you two, if I might, which is like one change that you'd like to see to help this agenda, to help people, leaders work together across government. Is
thinking first about the enterprise. And I know the enterprise is not a term that everybody loves, but thinking first about how we make sure that we design and deliver everything that we do to meet our end clients. And that means getting out of our silos. It means figuring out who are those in your community, who has already done. And when you think about how to show the incentive of what you're doing, the best way to bring cost-saving measures, the best way to rationalize services is to find how well it's been done elsewhere and build on that. And that is not a knee-jerk reaction as government. Our knee-jerk reaction is to rebuild and start from scratch. And if we do that, then we can have better systems that meet the needs of our citizens, because we're not going to have different iterations in every organization.
Last thoughts, Annie? What change you'd like to see?
Oh my goodness, so many. But I will. I think that if I'm to center it on this topic and the government of Canada, I would think about being bold and actually confronting, and really confronting uncomfortably, the policy, the systemic challenges to hiring, retaining, building leaders that represent this country, that actually also reflect the people that we serve and that think about outcomes for people outside this organization, not just our own personal wins. And I think that will likely run counter to some of the things that we've codified in the system. But given that just this past weekend we had an opportunity to reflect on, Canada just had the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, it is time to confront some awkward truths about this organization too.
Chris, do you have any last thoughts? It applies to the UK rather, not going to tell the Canadians what to do, but any last thoughts on change you'd like to see?
I think ongoing cross-government collaboration is really key to unlock things. Lots of departments are still coming up with their own solutions, whereas I think there is a way to be more efficient, but still, have solutions that meet citizens' needs a lot better. And if we continue doing things in individual departments, we're never going to have government services that are easy to access for a citizen. They're always going to have to go to each government. So even, just one last thing, even within DEFRA, there's, these 32 different ALBs, and they each come up the idea with a single customer portal, not realizing that there might be another, 20. So there's not a single customer portal. So I think a lot of things that we said today, just about that wider picture and the collaboration with keeping the end goals in mind and the citizens that we all serve.
Thank you very much. Thank you all very much for coming along for this last session. I appreciate you sticking it out. We really do. There's a drinks reception now, so maybe see something there.